The carriage sped down a road in a dense forest, pursued by a pack of ferocious beasts. Gilles, the butler, struggled to control the carriage, shouting for Princess Ashna to hold on tight. Ashna panicked, screaming as the beasts closed in. Just then, a figure appeared, Athal, a passing adventurer, who had spotted the dangerous situation ahead. The carriage overturned right in front of him, throwing Gilles and Ashna to the ground. As the beasts roared and drew closer, a terrified Ashna told Gilles to run for it. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed. A wolf's head was blown apart, leaving Ashna stunned. From a distance, Athal, their savior, had locked onto his target. He recalled a conversation with a god who had informed him that he had died and would be reincarnated in another world, where he would possess a special weapon, a one-of-a-kind rifle. Athal calmly pulled the trigger, wiping out the pack of wolves in an instant, as if it were target practice. But the final enemy caught his attention, a giant boar that nimbly dodged his bullets and retaliated by swinging its massive axe. He then locked onto the lone boar, and this time the beast couldn't escape. Its head exploded. Athal happily tallied the monsters he had killed and the bullets he had left, then began crafting special ammunition. Meanwhile, Gilles and Ashna rested on the ground. While Athal selected new abilities for himself, Ashna slowly regained consciousness, feeling disoriented and looking around in confusion, then turned to Gilles, relieved to see they were both safe. But when she saw Athal, she immediately became wary. Suspecting he was an assassin sent by her uncle to harm her, she warned Athal not to come any closer and tried to protect Gilles. Ashna even threatened him in the name of her father, a lord, demanding he stay away. Gilles tried to calm Ashna down, but she remained suspicious of Athal. When she realized her mistake, Ashna quickly apologized. Athal accepted with a smile, understanding the terrifying ordeal they had just been through, and told her to forget about it. Still, Ashna was embarrassed for misjudging him. Gilles, feeling responsible, offered to take the blame instead of his mistress. On their new carriage ride, Athal reassured them that their safety was what mattered most, and that giving him a ride was more than enough thanks. Ashna admired Athal's kindness but didn't know his name yet, so Athal finally introduced himself. In return, Ashna introduced herself and Gilles, despite her noble status. Athal wondered why they were traveling without any guards. Gilles explained that they had hired a group of adventurers to escort them to the town of Ribble, but later discovered that the group were actually enemies hired by Ashna's uncle, their goal being to take her hostage for ransom. Athal breathed a sigh of relief knowing they had found out in time, while Ashna added that it was the leader himself who had revealed this, and when they got the chance, they immediately fled. To ensure their safety, Athal decided to check the surroundings. Ashna was a little worried, but he reassured her that there was nothing to fear. Athal climbed onto the roof of the vehicle for a better view. Switching his gun to silent mode to put her at ease, he spotted another pack of beasts and quickly took them down, earning more bullet points. Gilles called out to check on Athal, but he skillfully lied, saying he didn't see anything unusual, so as not to worry everyone. Ashna finally felt at ease, looking out the window and hoping for a peaceful journey ahead. Finally, they arrived safely at the Lord's vast castle. A large bag of gold was presented to them, filled with gold coins, leaving Athal utterly astonished. Gureen, Ashna's father, expressed his gratitude with the generous reward, offering further assistance if needed. Athal humbly refused the large reward, saying the mission was actually very simple. Gilles encouraged him to take the reward, telling him he deserved it for protecting them throughout the journey. Ashna also tried to persuade Athal to accept more, even offering him extra food, but he just smiled, lost in his own thoughts. Athal realized the true meaning of this reward. It wasn't just for saving Ashna, but also to keep him quiet about the incident. He was surprised by Gureen's power and understood the gravity of the situation. In the end, Athal decided to accept the reward, bringing Gureen a sense of relief. The three of them were still sitting in the living room, with Gureen once again thanking Athal for his brave actions. expressing that he couldn't bear to imagine what would have happened if Ashna and Gil had run into trouble and called Athal their savior. While at the castle, Athal asked for a favor, explaining that he had just arrived from Ribble and needed help understanding the local customs. Ashna cheerfully offered to help, but Gurine stopped her. Understanding Athal's true intention, Ashna pouted and sat in a corner, while Gurine asked Gil if there was anyone suitable for the task. Gil suggested that Athal should buy a slave. This idea surprised both Ashna and Athal, but Gil explained that slavery was legal in Ribble, and Athal could choose anyone he wanted, as long as he paid. This explanation piqued Athal's curiosity. In a nearby prison, a poor girl was in shackles. In a flashback, Athal recalled the moment he found himself bewildered in a library. Suddenly, a god sitting behind him greeted him. Stunned, he asked who the person was. God introduced himself. But at first, Athal didn't believe him, until he took a closer look at the mystical surroundings and realized the old man seemed very familiar. Suddenly, he understood everything, which pleased the god. However, Athal remembered he was just playing a video game. Back home, Athal had been confused, not understanding why he was there. The god tried to jog Athal's memory, but he couldn't remember anything, as he was too focused on the game. That is, until the god revealed that Athal had been stabbed by an intruder, causing his death in the present. Back in reality, Athal was still in the castle, still in shock. He shared that slavery was illegal in his homeland. And the story continued in the living room. As Ashna and her father listened intently, Athal asked more about the slavery system, and Gil explained that slaves here are skilled laborers who can be hired through merchants. Though they have little education, they're capable in many different jobs. Gil added that newcomers like Athal could use slaves as guides. They just needed to find a trustworthy slave trader. He reassured him that slavery here isn't harsh, as they are treated kindly. Suddenly, Athal felt dizzy, his mind growing hazy at the word slave. His eyes seemed to react, and an image of the god's eye appeared in his consciousness. Ashna noticed something was off with Athal and quickly asked how he was. A moment later, Athal regained his composure. Ashna, worried, thought he might be tired and offered to let him stay the night to rest. Athal refused, saying he was fine and that he would be leaving. But Ashna earnestly pleaded for him to stay as a token of gratitude for his help. Gurine asked Gil to prepare a guest room and dinner. In silence, Athal still seemed shocked by this world's culture. The next day, he visited a slave shop, entering with caution. Baz, a slave trader, greeted him cheerfully, explaining that he takes good care of the slaves for his clients. Athal's cold gaze frightened Baz, who trembled as Athal stared him down. Baz asked Athal what kind of slave he was looking for, inquiring about race, age, and appearance, and he would introduce the most suitable one. Athal contemplated, then asked Baz to find a slave who wasn't intimidating, looked discreet, and was younger and no taller than him, someone who would accompany him on his journey. His final request was for someone who didn't talk much. Baz jotted down all the requests, and then led Athal down to a dark basement. He unlocked a wooden door, and proudly presented his favorite slave, a beautiful blonde girl with her hands in shackles, which left Athal quite surprised. Baz continued to present other options for Athal. The first was a frail and petite-looking slave, followed by a full-figured woman with dark skin and short hair. The slaves quickly showed their admiration for Athal. He agreed that they were a pretty good match for his requirements. Baz revealed that these women were once from a fallen noble family, but still possessed many useful skills. However, Athal just remained silent and then walked away, leaving Baz surprised that he showed no interest. Undeterred, Baz introduced the next group of slaves, 2 muscular men, ideal as warriors. One had a dragon-like appearance, the other was bald and covered in battle scars. Baz proudly presented them as powerful fighters, especially highlighting the one with rare dragonkin blood, boasting that his shop was probably the only place that sold their kind. Even so, Athal wasn't satisfied. saying that someone from the dragonkin race would attract too much attention. He started to lose patience as none of the options interested him. Baz quickly said that there were still many other slaves Athal could see. Athal followed Baz but suddenly felt a strange sensation. He glanced around, and his right eye suddenly reacted to one of the doors up ahead. Baz began to panic as Athal pointed to that very door. Suspicious, Athal ordered Baz to open it. Baz hesitated, discouraging Athal from choosing this particular slave, explaining she was damaged beyond repair and would only be a burden to him. Baz argued that it went against the shop's goal of helping its customers. Athal fell into thought, realizing it was indeed her who had made his eye react, and began to observe the slave named Caro carefully. He felt she was being treated unfairly, and asked if this was illegal. Baz, terrified, denied the accusation and claimed that Caro preferred the dark because she was afraid of the light. To prove his point, Baz flipped on the light, and just as he'd said, Caro trembled in terror as the light flooded in. Despite her fear, she still managed to greet them politely, which moved Athal to pity, and he immediately told Baz to turn off the light. Caro recoiled into the corner, trembling in fear. Baz explained that she was a beastkin who had been abandoned and was severely injured all over. They didn't really know much about her, only that she feared the light and was covered in deep scars. Baz assured Athal that they had tried to treat Caro, but she had lost her appetite, so she probably wouldn't live much longer. Caro looked hopeless as Athal questioned her, trying to learn more. Baz was taken aback by Athal's decision as he confidently asked to begin the paperwork, choosing Caro as his slave. Caro couldn't believe it. While Baz prepared the necessary documents, in the office, Baz explained to Athal that he and Caro needed to perform a ritual to create a slave seal, which would compel Caro to obey his orders unless she was mistreated. Baz stressed that a master must take good care of their slave and warned Athal that if he violated these terms, he would face penalties. Finally, Baz asked Athal what would become of Caro should he pass away. Athal consulted Baz and was told the options included freeing the slave, returning them to the dealer, or in rare cases, the slave could even inherit their master's estate. Athal was lost in thought before making his decision, and Baz gave him more time to consider. Baz's assistant entered, announcing that everything was ready for the ritual. The assistant ushered them in, leading Caro into the room. Caro looked empty, her eyes lifeless, as her coverings were removed, revealing the wounds on her body. Athal moved closer, observing her intently, and introduced himself, asking for her name. Caro, though incredibly weak, looked up at him with weary eyes. The assistant explained that Athal would be her new master. Telling her to greet him, difficult as it was, Caro tried to introduce herself, as tears streamed down her face, begging him to take care of her. Her fragility deeply concerned Athal, and Baz pointed out that even her throat was damaged. Athal didn't seem to mind, as Caro continued to weep and cough. Athal asked to begin the ritual inside the magic circle. The assistant began, instructing him to place a collar on Caro, a symbol of her servitude, which she must wear at all times. He stepped toward Caro, who stood perfectly still, and gently placed the collar around her neck. The assistant continued with the contract, requesting a drop of Athal's blood. Athal pricked his finger lightly, letting a drop of blood fall onto the contract. The assistant gently pricked Caro's finger, and she let a drop of her blood fall onto the paper. She chanted a spell while holding the contract, causing a stream of magical light to appear. Athal was amazed, while Caro looked unhappy. Finally, the assistant asked Athal to help Caro absorb the stream of light. He moved closer, gently holding her face, asking her to slowly swallow the magical light. Caro closed her eyes and her necklace began to glow, completing the ritual. Still inside the magic circle, Athal cheerfully reintroduced himself. And this time, Caro responded with a hint of hope on her face. Leaving the shop, Athal and Caro walked together, while Baz and the assistant spoke inside. The assistant wished Caro good luck, while Baz took a sip of his drink, murmuring that only the gods knew what would happen, but he sensed something special about Athal and hoped he would treat Caro well. Outside of town, Athal carried Caro in his right arm, holding her like a child. She leaned against him trustingly, her arms around him, though she still coughed in fits. Athal gently leaned in close to her face and asked if the light was too bright for her eyes, but Caro replied that it was fine. When he saw they were far enough from anyone's sight, he stopped, set her down, and helped her lean against a rock. Athal asked if she wanted to heal her wounds. She was moved but lowered her head, replying that it was useless because she was beyond saving. Athal tried to give her hope, but Caro remained silent, saying that nothing in this world could heal her. She began to talk about her old dreams, how everyone used to say they would come true, but in the end they didn't, leaving her in despair. However, seeing the ritual just now, Caro suddenly remembered the sparkling night sky from her hometown, as beautiful as the scene before her. She realized that was the last thing she wanted to see before she passed away. Caro expressed her doubts about why Athal had bought her, and what would happen to her now. But then, through her tears, she shared that one of her wishes had come true, which made her truly happy. Athal sincerely asked again if she wanted to be healed. Caro, with a hopeful tear in her eye, nodded but then hesitated. That was all Athal needed to hear. He took out his rifle, selected a magic bullet, and recalled a memory of a deity revealing to him the ability to create enchanted bullets, including both offensive and restorative rounds. Athal and Caro got ready. He asked if she knew what he was about to do, and Caro had no idea. When he asked if she was scared, she admitted she was, but he reassured her, telling her to trust him. She gradually felt a sense of peace, closing her eyes as tears rolled down her cheeks, standing still, ready to accept her fate. Athal prepared to pull the trigger. The moment the gun went off, Caro felt the impact, and felt as if she were floating up gently. A wave of warmth surrounded her, as if she were being embraced by light. She didn't understand what was happening, only that she could feel different sensations, even pain after so long. It was a feeling she had forgotten while she was paralyzed. Caro slowly realized she could walk and run again, just like before. When she landed safely, she looked completely healthy. She turned to Athal, surprised, and asked what he had done. They looked at each other, and Athal finally heard her real voice, then whispered a compliment. Overcome with emotion, Caro threw herself into his arm, sobbing uncontrollably. Athal gently let Caro cry in his arms for hours until she stopped. She apologized for bothering him, but Athal just patted her head to comfort her, asking if she felt better now. The two looked into each other's eyes, and Caro gave a small nod. Athal gently helped Caro to her feet. She checked her body. Seeing that her wounds had vanished and that she could move freely, Athal was pleased to see the recovery bullet had worked. She continued to jump around, filled with joy, making Athal a little flustered as he watched her every move. Finally, Caro believed she had fully recovered, and her happiness was contagious. She thanked him and hugged him tightly, and he reminded her to be careful. They shared an intimate look, and Caro couldn't help but ask why he had helped her. Athal revealed that he needed her help, but first, he wanted to buy her a new outfit. They returned to town and stopped by a clothing store. The shopkeeper recommended a new outfit for Caro. It was a beautiful dress, the most stylish one in the shop, inspired by the style of the famous Ashna. Athal complimented the dress and asked Caro if she liked it. Although Caro said yes, she still felt she wasn't worthy of such an elegant dress. Athal encouraged her to open up more so he could better understand her wishes. She politely complied and confided that she wanted to be useful, especially in dangerous situations, but she hesitated, finding it difficult to express what she meant. The shopkeeper helped Caro choose, pointing out that she belonged to the wild beastkin tribe. He explained that people like her possess superior physical strength, so they should prioritize comfortable clothing for ease of movement. Following his advice, Caro changed into an adorable, sporty dress. Athal really liked this new outfit and thought it suited her better. Caro agreed and thanked him, her face beaming with happiness, while Athal couldn't help but silently admire her. Leaving the shop, they started looking for a place to rest. Athal asked Caro if she knew of any places, but she shamefully admitted that she had never explored the town. having been imprisoned for so long. He was understanding. The two of them continued to walk around until a stranger approached them. It was Flana, dressed in a maid's uniform, who enthusiastically invited them to stay at her inn, a very famous place in the area. Flana suddenly grabbed Athal's hand, surprising both him and Caro. She then quickly led them both to the Soul Tree Inn. There, she politely welcomed them again and formally introduced herself. The inn was spacious, with many comfortable rooms. Athal was pleased with the pleasant atmosphere of the inn and decided to stay. Flana was delighted and quickly ran to tell her mother they had guests. Flana's mother gently reminded her to stay calm and apologized to Athal and Caro for her daughter's energetic personality. Then she asked if they needed a room for two. Athal confirmed, adding that they would be staying for 7 days. This surprised her, and she praised Flana for bringing in guests. Flana curiously asked Caro if Athal was her master, and Caro confirmed. Flana quickly told her about the inn's large public bathing area, offering to reserve it exclusively for Caro and Athal for 1 hour. Hearing this, Caro was incredibly excited and said she would tell Athal. Flana mischievously whispered to Caro, suggesting that she should help Athal wash his back, making Caro blush with embarrassment. After checking in, Athal called Caro to come with him to their room on the 2nd floor. She followed behind him, wanting to take his hand, but she hesitated. Instead, she called out to him. Athal turned back and asked what was wrong. Caro timidly told him about Flana's offer. Athal liked the idea of bathing before dinner and agreed immediately. However, he noticed that Caro was acting strangely, so he asked if something was wrong. Caro hesitated awkwardly, then finally offered to help wash his back. This caught Athal by surprise, and he became flustered. He told her she didn't have to do things like that and suggested she could go bathe alone if she wanted. Even though Caro insisted, he politely declined and encouraged her to enjoy a relaxing bath. Caro entered the bathing area, wearing only her collar, and was stunned by the vast space. She revealed that it was the first time she'd ever seen such a large bathhouse. Looking in the mirror, she gazed at her tail and was astonished to realize the burn scars on her body were gone. After relaxing, she returned to the room, knocked, and Athal let her in. She thanked him for letting her bathe first. Athal remarked that she was quite fast and advised her to take more time to relax. As Athal was getting his things ready for his bath, he noticed Caro sitting on the floor. He asked in surprise why she was doing that. Caro explained that she was taught to behave that way. Immediately, Athal scooped her up like a child, surprising her. He gently told her not to do that anymore, then placed her on the bed to be more comfortable. The two of them sat side by side. Caro said sadly that she was just a slave. Athal seriously asked Caro to listen to him. He said that he understood their relationship was based on a contract, but admitted that he wasn't familiar with the customs here and wasn't sure if what he was about to say was appropriate. This surprised Caro. Her eyes filled with curiosity. Athal told her sincerely that he considered her a friend and wanted her to treat him the same way. His words moved Caro. She nodded in agreement with a happy smile, which delighted Athal. But their intimate moment was cut short by the loud rumbling of his stomach. Caro quickly apologized, but Athal laughed, saying it was his fault. He suggested they should eat first, and he would bathe later. Before leaving, Athal decided to put away his things. He suddenly opened a small portal and placed his rifle and his coins inside. This act astonished Caro. Athal noticed her reaction and suddenly realized he had acted too carelessly. He asked if what he did was unusual in this world. Caro nodded, confirming she'd never seen anything like it before. In a flashback, Athal recalled the instructions for the rifle written on a whiteboard. As he was studying with the god, the deity suddenly asked him how he planned to store his equipment, stressing that carrying it all around would be very inconvenient. Athal hadn't thought about that until he came up with the idea of a storage system that could appear at will, sucking in items like a black hole. The god liked the idea and approved it, making Athal incredibly excited. He even noted on the board that only he could use the storage. Back at the inn, Athal and Caro were still in the room. Lost in thought, Athol realized he had been too casual about using his magic, so he couldn't blame Caro for being surprised. He explained to her that it was one of his special abilities, which made Caro extremely intrigued. Athol figured these abilities were probably one of a kind and asked her to keep it a secret. He also asked her to warn him if he accidentally did anything else unusual so he could consider his next move. Caro promised to keep quiet, making Athol happy. This made her think about Athol's special power, and she trusted in his capabilities even more. Caro empathized with his feeling of being lost in this world, but this was the first time she had seen him so happy. Caro recalled her own miserable situation and felt grateful to Athol for choosing and trusting her. In response, she bowed her head, promising to serve him for the rest of her life. Athol began to explain his weapon to her, which she recognized immediately. He told her to call it a rifle, a long-range weapon that fires various types of magical bullets. Caro looked fascinated, and when Athol let her touch the rifle, she was surprised by its weight. Athol further explained that the rifle's power was equivalent to high-level magic, and that only he could use it. So if it were stolen, no one could use it for evil. He emphasized that this was a secret, and Caro promised to keep it. She suddenly lost her balance, but Athol quickly caught her. Worried that he might have exhausted her, but Caro was simply hungry. Both were excited to see the lavish dinner before them, and they enjoyed the meal together. While Flana and her mother were busy serving guests, Caro curiously asked Athol why he came to Ribble. Athol thought for a moment while sipping his coffee, then revealed that he currently had no specific goal. He just wanted to use the inn as a base and learn the norms of this land. Caro suggested that he could become an adventurer and take on quests from the guilds. This idea caught Athol's attention, and he asked for more details. Caro explained that adventurers' guilds operate all over the world, offering quests to those who sign up, and that Ribble had one as well. The quests are ranked by difficulty, and adventurers receive rewards upon completion. She also warned Athol about difficult quests, like facing monsters or entering dangerous places. Despite the high rewards, these missions require solid skills. She also reminded him to be wary of violent adventurers. However, Caro also assured him that most quests were well-intentioned and helped adventurers integrate into a new land, something she deeply appreciated. Athol agreed with Caro's perspective and asked if he could join the guild even though he was a foreigner. She confirmed that it wouldn't be a problem, but mentioned that slaves weren't allowed to register. Even so, Caro was willing to help him complete quests if needed. Athol remembered Caro mentioning her fighting abilities back at the clothing store. When he confirmed it, Caro first shook her head no, then quickly changed her mind to a yes, leaving Athol a bit confused about her answer. Finally, she confidently declared that she could indeed fight. Athol recalled the god's words that defeating monsters would make him stronger and enhance his skills. Foreseeing the dangers ahead, he trusted in the strength of Caro, a beastkin, and decided to help her improve her skills. The two of them made a plan to register at the Adventurers Guild tomorrow, and Caro happily agreed. Athol said they needed to get her some gear, but Caro was hesitant to let him spend money on her. He insisted it was necessary, sharing stories of the dangerous monsters he'd encountered and emphasizing that they couldn't be too careful. They stopped by a weapons shop and started looking at the swords. Athol carefully examined each type before turning to Caro. Considering which weapon would best suit her agility, he picked up a one-handed sword and asked if she had any preferences or any experience with this type of weapon. Caro looked a little worried, admitting that she had learned the basics but lacked practice. Feeling somewhat inadequate, Athol reassured her not to worry and encouraged her to keep improving. The shopkeeper, Bob, walked over and offered to help. Athol gladly accepted. The man saw that Athol was holding a common steel sword. He explained that it was a light, powerful weapon and was beginner-friendly. Bob introduced himself and suggested they test the sword on a magic dummy, which surprised Athol. Bob explained that it was a magically powered machine used to test a weapon's strength. He suggested starting at the easiest level and asked if they wanted to give it a try. Athol turned to ask Caro what she thought, and she agreed, excited to test her skills. In a clear area, Caro held the steel sword facing the dummy. Ethal watched intently as the dummy began to attack fiercely. Caro deftly dodged the blows, her focus sharp, then swung the sword at the dummy. However, she looked tired. And Ethal realized the sword was probably still too heavy for her. He got an idea and stepped forward to help. While Caro was fighting, Ethal tossed a dagger toward her, telling her to use it. Caro quickly understood what he meant and dashed for the dagger. The dummy approached, and Caro positioned herself. She leaped up, launching a direct blow at the training dummy, causing it to fall after taking enough damage. She landed gracefully, her eyes fixed on the fallen dummy, then celebrated her victory with glee, proudly declaring it was her first time using a knife and that it felt surprisingly easy. Ethal also felt a sense of pride. While Caro was jumping for joy, he noticed something inconvenient about her chest area. Bob quickly suggested a solution with a suitable piece of equipment. Caro was still celebrating, while Ethal opted to buy the entire weapon set for her and quickly paid for it. Among the items he purchased, a mysterious knife was displayed prominently on the counter. Ethal felt something was off and asked Caro if she felt it too. She confirmed, and they both moved closer, carefully observing the knife hanging on the wall. Caro sensed something special about it. Bob was surprised to see them notice the weapon, expressing admiration for their keen eyes. Ethal asked for more information about the knife, and Bob eagerly explained that it was a rare and powerful weapon. He carefully took it down, enthusiastically showcasing the dagger, emphasizing that it was a rare magical weapon. Caro was stunned by the legendary weapon, which made Ethal curious about her reaction. Bob revealed that he had acquired the knife from an adventurer friend during a perilous quest. He highlighted its wondrous ability to grant its wielder special powers, making it a coveted item among many adventurers. Ethal was captivated, and Bob confirmed that this weapon could increase the user's speed. He also praised the knife's beauty, making it valuable both functionally and aesthetically. Ethal asked about the price, surprising Caro. Bob stated the price of the knife was 20 gold coins, which stunned Caro, who argued that it was unfair. He was planning on buying it and kept trying to warn her. Meanwhile, Ethal calculated that the reward money from Gurine, a few hundred gold coins in total, should be enough. Even so, he was still trying to get used to the local currency and hesitated. Ethal asked Bob if this was a reasonable price, and Bob confirmed that it wasn't too expensive. However, Caro disagreed, finding the price too high. Ethal asked if she wanted the knife, but Caro shook her head no, saying it was too expensive. Ethal tried to negotiate, but Bob stood firm. He gave Bob a menacing look, then turned to ask for Caro's opinion. She thought the knife was great, but wished for a lower price. In the end, Ethal decided to buy it for the full price, much to Bob's delight. Caro tried to stop him, but Ethal reassured her it was a worthwhile investment, which only frustrated her. After paying, he proceeded to negotiate a discount for the other items, and this time, Bob agreed. As they left the shop, Ethal handed the magic knife to Caro, leaving her stunned to possess such a valuable item. Despite being a mere slave, Ethal asserted that the weapon would improve her combat abilities, calling it a wise investment. He explained that using such a weapon would make it easier for Caro to progress and become stronger. With an affectionate pat on the head, Ethal expressed his belief in her, advising that if she was going to worry about him, the future held far greater concerns. Caro agreed, slowly coming to understand Ethal's nature. The two continued their stroll through town, and they soon spotted the guild hall Bob had mentioned. As they stepped inside, they found a lively atmosphere filled with adventurers, either discussing quests or relaxing with drinks. As they looked around, Caro revealed it was her first time in a guild. Ethal suggested they register, and the two headed to an open reception desk. Buras, the receptionist, greeted them. Ethal asked about the registration process, and Buras handed him a form to fill out. Ethal asked if all the sections were required, and Buras explained that only the name was necessary. The occupation and skill sections were optional but useful for connecting with other parties. Athal filled out the form while Caro watched curiously. After finishing, he returned the form to Buras for review. Buras noticed that only Athal's name was filled in. Athal confirmed to Buras that it was fine and to process it as is. Buras processed the registration document, while Caro curiously asked Athal about the blank sections on the form. Athal explained that he wasn't interested in joining other parties, and that this would also help keep his abilities a secret. Caro nodded in agreement, recalling his goal. She waited patiently with Athal, a look of excitement on her face. Suddenly, an aggressive group of adventurers approached, slamming their mugs of ale down on a table and glaring threateningly at Athal and Caro. Buras continued guiding Athal through the process of creating his guild card, telling him to touch a crystal to imprint his information. When Athal asked for more details on how the guild operated, Buras was surprised, as most adventurers didn't like being interrupted during registration. However, Athal insisted that he wanted to understand everything clearly. Buras went on to introduce the ranking system, from the lowest rank F to the highest ESP. Newcomers like him were F rank, and as their rank increased, so did the job opportunities, though the danger also increased. Caro listened intently, especially when Buras revealed the process for reaching the prestigious S rank, which required royal patronage and rigorous evaluations. Athal was focused on simply progressing within the guild, rather than aiming for the highest ranks. Buras advised them to choose quests from the notice board, surprisingly revealing that they could start immediately after registration by submitting a quest request to him. Buras further explained the guild's ranking system, stating that Athal could only accept quests up to one rank higher than his current one. In order to minimize risk, Athal understood and nodded in agreement. Buras then gave Athal his free guild card, but warned that if it was lost, the replacement fee would be 1 gold coin. Athal was appreciative and expressed his gratitude, which moved Buras, as he rarely met adventurers who were so considerate and appreciative of his efforts. Athal asked Caro what kind of quest she would prefer. Caro suggested a safer quest, since it had been a long time since she had fought, and suggested a simple job like gathering materials. Meanwhile, Athal was considering a different quest. Caro noticed and worried that he might choose a difficult quest, quickly catching him in the act as he looked over the request. Athal chuckled, patting her on the head, and agreed to take the easy quest she had suggested. She read over the herb-gathering quest, which required finding 10 bundles. Caro remarked that while gathering herbs was a lot of work, it was safe. However, she was worried about the other quest Athal had chosen, to exterminate a pack of wolves that was troubling a nearby village. She sighed, but Athal quickly lifted her spirits, reminding her they couldn't avoid fighting if they wanted to get stronger, and he promised to protect her. After finishing the paperwork, Buras reminded them that quest completion would be thoroughly checked. For the herb gathering, they had to provide all 10 bundles. For the wolf extermination, they needed confirmation from the village chief. Buras gave them a reference book as a gift, containing information on IRVs and other useful materials for their journey. Athal thanked Buras for his support, and Buras replied with a smile, happy to help. Athal and Caro left the guild, and he decided to prioritize the wolf extermination quest to help the village as soon as possible. Caro felt anxious, but Athal encouraged her, reminding her they would handle the wolf pack together. As the two headed toward the village, they suddenly stopped, confronted by the aggressive group of adventurers they had met earlier. Athal stared at them, while the leader mockingly asked if they were new around here. Caro was frightened, backing away and trying to ignore the group. But as they tried to pass, the leader got angry, demanding that Athal pay attention to them. Athal, annoyed, bluntly asked what they wanted. A bald guy, calling himself a veteran adventurer, offered to guide newbies like them, but a blond man demanded compensation money instead and showed a threatening interest in Caro, causing her to panic and press close to Athal for protection. This angered Athal, He declared they were fools for thinking he would ever let that happen. The leader flew into a rage at Athal's insult and rushed forward to attack. But Athal dodged him easily, causing the man to stumble and fall, which only made him angrier. He ordered his lackeys to grab Caro, making her scream in terror. Athal raised his rifle, looking annoyed, aiming it at the heads of the aggressive adventurers, and gave them a cold stare before pulling the trigger. The sleep darts quickly took them down, causing them to collapse to the ground. Athal looked down at the defeated men with contempt, while Caro asked worriedly what he'd done. He reassured her that they were just sleeping, and noted how useful the sleep darts were, planning to make more. As they were talking, a mysterious woman watched them from a nearby window. She was a captivating fairy, wearing an alluring outfit, his eyes never leaving Athal and Caro. At the guild, Burrus recalled the incident when Athal easily took down the adventurers, the violent D-rankers, with his gun, which left him completely astonished. When Burrus demanded an explanation, Athal simply replied that it was a secret, confident that Burrus would never guess it. Burrus was confused but ultimately agreed, letting the matter drop for the time being. Later, Athal helped Caro to her feet. As she insisted that she was fine, she looked at him with admiring eyes, praising him for defeating the adventurers so easily. Athal explained that those men were weak and uncoordinated, adding that if they were truly strong, they wouldn't have acted so recklessly in the first place. Caro still looked at him with admiration. Athal checked to see if she was injured, and she assured him she was fine, apologizing for having worried him. Athal asked Burrus to watch the sleeping men and told him they were leaving. Burrus reassured him not to worry and wished them a safe trip. On their journey through the forest, Caro recalled the recent attack, trembling as she contemplated the difference between fighting training dummies and facing real enemies. The expectations Athal had for her, especially since he'd given her a magical weapon, made her anxious. Images of her time as a slave surfaced in her mind, and the fear of returning to that life if she failed to protect him grew more palpable. Caro silently resolved to protect Athal, but at the same time, she worried that her weaknesses might put him in danger. Lost in her thoughts, she bumped into Athal when he suddenly stopped. She quickly apologized, wincing, afraid she had annoyed him. But Athal gently motioned for her to be quiet and get down. He whispered for her to look at the bushes ahead, where they spotted a group of resting goblins. Caro recognized them as fast-breeding magical creatures that often attacked homes, livestock, and adventurers. Athal asked if she could see any of the lost adventurers' belongings, and Caro confirmed that she could. They guessed the items likely belonged to adventurers the goblins had ambushed earlier. Analyzing the situation, Athal speculated that the goblins were resting after an attack and that they might be spotted if they approached carelessly. He wanted to take control of the situation, but recognizing his own limitations, he asked Caro for her attack strategy. Surprised, Caro suggested they observe from a distance, approach slowly, and then take them all out in a single coordinated assault. Athal liked the plan and confirmed they would proceed with it. He told her to stay behind him, but to act as if she were leading the charge, leaving her to watch in surprise as he readied his rifle. Athal locked onto his targets, aiming from a distance at the resting goblins. Caro was amazed to see him preparing to shoot from so far away. In the blink of an eye, the goblins were swiftly taken down. Athal revealed that his initial plan was to snipe them from afar, explaining that his previous bullets were for recovery or inducing sleep, but the ones he used on the goblins were lethal rounds. Caro was both surprised and fascinated by the power of his weapon. Athal was proud of the rifle's capabilities, but Caro insisted that no one else could use it the way he could, and she even astutely noted his attack patterns, surprising him with her sharp observation. Caro confirmed that she had seen similar tactics when he took down the 3 adventurers, and her admiration for him grew even deeper. Athal suddenly realized that Burrus had probably noticed this as well. He placed a hand on Caro's shoulder, sincerely telling her that her keen observational skills had exceeded his expectations. Athal encouraged Caro to believe in herself, emphasizing that mistakes are opportunities to grow. He promised to protect her, and hoped that the recent attack had helped strengthen her resolve. Kero was moved by his words, her eyes welling up with tears. She threw her arms around Athal, expressing her deep gratitude and promised to try her absolute best. Athal tried to cheer her up. Remembering she couldn't join the Adventurers Guild, he suggested they split the reward, telling her she could use it for whatever she wanted and advising her to stop crying. At the ISSO slave shop, after Athal purchased Kero, the other slaves were taking a break from their duties. Petra, who excelled at entertainment but was poor at domestic chores, worried about Kero and her injuries, hoping that Athal would treat her well. Petra's confidant, Romeo, agreed and secretly admired Athal. But Petra felt jealous, as it seemed she had a crush on Athal too. Petra chatted with Amanda, another slave, figuring she'd be sold soon, but musing that Athal was too young for her. Amanda's young son ran to her side, and Amanda stressed that they had to be purchased as a pair. Cactus, a gentle but timid giant, was crying from loneliness, even though he believed Athal was a good person and wished for Kero to be happy. Ryogen, a powerful slave who had trouble communicating, tried to comfort Cactus, while also reminding the others to wish Kero well. The shop owner, Bob, watched the group of slaves and wondered when they would be sold, while his assistant suggested buying them and making them store employees. Athal and Kero finally arrived at West Stamp Village. Mayor Pablo greeted them cheerfully. Athal introduced himself as the adventurer the village had been waiting for, and Pablo introduced himself before inviting them to his home to rest after their long journey. While Kero took in her surroundings, Athal declined the invitation and asked for an immediate briefing on the quest, which involved eliminating a threat. Pablo agreed, and the villagers looked on with hope. In a flashback, Pablo began his tale. He recalled that the village once had bountiful fields until a pack of wild wolves from the forest started attacking. They managed at first, but as the wolves' numbers increased, the situation grew more severe. Athal asked if the number of wolves was even greater now, and Pablo confirmed it, adding that a bigger, more powerful type of wolf had appeared, which easily overpowered the village's best. Athal figured this was likely a boss-level monster, piquing Kero's interest. He asked the mayor for the monster's location, but Pablo questioned whether Athal was really strong enough to defeat them. Athal asserted his readiness, stressing that his job was to handle the monsters troubling the village, and that he wanted to begin at once. Pablo stressed that they should only weaken the pack and avoid confronting the leader wolf, as required by the guild's rules. Thinking it over, Athal realized that dealing with a high-level monster would entail a higher fee, which the villagers probably couldn't afford. To lighten their burden, he decided to feign ignorance about the leader wolf. He reassured the villagers and asked for the location, and they promptly handed him a map. Meanwhile, Kero considered how the villagers had intentionally kept the leader wolf a secret from the guild, and she grew worried for Athal's safety. Athal, however, was pleased with how convenient the quest was, seeing it as an opportunity to train his abilities. And he grew even more excited thinking about the reward. Having found a suitable position, Athal readied his gun, Model, aiming at the pack of wolves wandering near the rocks by the cave entrance. He asked Kero if she could see them, and she confirmed there were 9 in total. Athal remarked on her sharp observation skills but saw no sign of the alpha wolf. Kero suggested it might be inside the cave, and Athal agreed. Athal explained the attack plan to Kero. He asked her to quietly approach the pack from behind and give him the signal to launch a surprise attack. Since he was facing multiple agile opponents, he planned to use a special type of ammunition. He hoped Kero wouldn't have to fight, but still warned her to be ready, in case the alpha wolf emerged from the cave. Their goal was to take it down with a single shot. If they failed, Kero's mission was to quickly distract the alpha. He reminded her to be careful and carry out her duty. Kero nodded, showing she was ready. They prepared for the attack at dusk. Kero used her agility to sneak through the forest, carefully studying Athal's plan to prioritize taking down the weaker wolves first, isolating the alpha. Aware of her crucial role, Kero recalled the faith Athal had in her abilities and the opportunities he'd given her. She promised herself she wouldn't let him down. Caro hid behind a bush near the wolf den, watching the wolves standing guard. When she was ready, she gave Athal the signal. He received the signal and prepared to act. Athal carefully loaded the fire rounds. While Caro remained hidden behind the bush, he began to open fire. The blazing fire rounds flew toward the pack, and a sudden forest gust shifted direction, making the wolves realize something was wrong. Athal taunted them, but it was too late. The beasts were engulfed in a massive explosion, with flames scorching the surroundings. Caro held her position, remembering Athal's reminder to always be ready for anything. She watched her surroundings vigilantly, when suddenly a few surviving wolves charged out frantically. Without hesitation, Caro ambushed them. Trusting in her magic weapon, she called upon it to grant her strength, then swiftly stabbed a wolf, inflicting a heavy wound as her body floated in midair. The feeling of flight astonished and captivated her, as she discovered the weapon's incredible abilities in the heat of battle. Little by little, Caro's confidence grew. She quickly caught up to a stealthy wolf, delivering a powerful kick before finishing it off. As she dealt with the last wolf, Caro realized there were no enemies left. She braced herself for what was to come, her gaze fixed on the burning cave. She remained on high alert as a colossal wolf with enormous claws emerged. Caro gasped, unable to believe her eyes as she saw its sharp fangs dripping with saliva. Realizing this was a monster far beyond their level, she identified it as the Death Wolf, a high-level monster she had heard of before. From a distance, Athal also watched, stunned by the monster's form. According to the guild's guidebooks, the Death Wolf was distinguished by its filthy, dark red fur, was twice the size of a normal wolf, and possessed superior strength and agility. Described as a monster beyond the control of a B rank, this was undoubtedly a much higher-level creature. The monster let out a ferocious roar, its menacing eyes fixed on Caro. She trembled in fear, realizing this was an unexpected foe. The Death Wolf focused its savage gaze on her, but Caro held her ground, signaling to Athal. Receiving the signal, he quickly prepared himself. Meanwhile, Caro bravely ran to distract the monster. Athal opened fire, and massive explosions echoed, engulfing the monster in a sea of flames. Caro took cover behind a bush, thinking they had succeeded. But when she looked again, she was stunned. To see the monster still standing there, engulfed in flames but completely unharmed. She was astonished to realize the flames seemed to have no effect on it. Athal kept his focus, watching through his scope. As the monster roared in fury, its massive figure looming over Caro, who couldn't believe her eyes. The monster prepared to charge at Caro with frenzied strength. She quickly dodged, but this only enraged it further. She realized its terrifying speed. Even with her magic weapon, she couldn't outrun it. Athal began to suspect the monster was aware of his ranged attacks, forcing it to close in on Caro and complicating his shot. Caro hid behind a large boulder, but the monster shattered it with ease, forcing her to flee forward. She sank to the ground, feeling helpless as the monster closed in. Just then, gunshots rang out, causing the monster to halt. Startling Caro, the monster deflected the bullets with its sharp claws. Athal fired continuously, yelling at the monster to stay away from Caro. However, the monster seemed to absorb the regular bullets, only being distracted for a moment. Athal realized the normal bullets only served to slow the monster down as it adapted to his attacks. He also discovered that his magic bullets were ineffective against it. Hoping to find a compatible type, he quickly prepared a new kind of magic bullet. Meanwhile, Caro saw the sun was beginning to set, and worried that if the monster escaped, it would attack the village, leading to disastrous consequences. Athal held his position, becoming Caro's pillar of support. She drew strength from him as the monster drew ever closer. Athal focused on finding the right type of magic bullet. As the monster prepared to strike, suddenly, Caro charged straight towards the Death Wolf. She once again pleaded with her magic weapon for more strength, leaping up and slashing deeply into the monster's neck, inflicting a grievous wound. The monster howled in pain. But Caro didn't stop, launching another head-on assault. The ground began to tremble as the monster flew into a rage. With a precise strike, It struck Caro, sending her flying and knocking the weapon from her grasp. Caro lay on the ground, leaving her wide open for the monster's attack. It roared in fury, charging straight at her while she was heavily injured. Despite the pain, Caro resiliently stood up facing the monster. She continued to fight back, holding it off to buy precious time for Athal. Seeing her courage, Athal finally finished preparing the decisive bullet. He thanked Caro for holding on long enough, then vowed to end this fight. Athal pulled the trigger, and the magic bullet struck the monster. Caro watched as the death wolf howled in agony, the bullet piercing its body, causing it to scream wildly. But the monster still didn't fall. It dug its massive claws into the ground, refusing to yield to the attack. Caro was stunned by the monster's deafening roar, a testament to its overwhelming power. Athal noticed the monster was enduring the attack, impressed by its resilience. But he knew there was one more step to finish it. Athal activated the bullet's special power. The monster screamed in pain as the magic took effect. Caro cried out in surprise, as the death wolf was struck down by a powerful electric shock. She watched the beast collapse to the ground, unconscious. Athal quickly ran over to check on Caro. She reassured him that she was fine and had landed safely, much to his relief. Looking at the monster, Athal noted the amount of power it took to bring it down. Caro agreed, acknowledging it was a creature of unparalleled strength. Athal was proud that they had completed their first mission, savoring the feeling of victory. He praised Caro, but she humbly said her success was thanks to the magic weapon that enhanced her power. Athal nodded, acknowledging that investing in the weapon was indeed a wise choice. Suddenly, however, Caro lost her balance and collapsed. Athal quickly caught her, worried about her leg. Caro apologized, explaining that she wasn't injured, but the wave of relief after the battle had made her lose her footing. Athal gently comforted her, reminding her that this was just their first battle, and that this success was only the beginning, expressing his confidence in her, which made Caro truly happy. He suggested they return to the mayor to confirm the mission's completion and start thinking about their future plans. Caro agreed, eager to share the good news with the villagers. Arriving at the hidden herbal sanctuary for their next mission, they were both amazed by the place's beauty and secrecy. Caro carefully explored, examining the herbs and checking them against the guidebook they had. Athal suggested they start gathering them right away. In a flashback, Athal recalled the moment they returned to report their encounter with the death wolf. The mayor and the villagers were all stunned, insisting they had no idea such a monster existed. The mayor apologized profusely, but the villagers took responsibility themselves and offered to pay the reward in installments, which made Caro anxious. Athal reassured them that the situation was unforeseen. However, he stressed that in the future, providing complete and detailed information for missions was crucial. The mayor burst into tears when the mission was confirmed as a success. Athal left the task of processing the magic stone from the monster to the villagers. Surprisingly, Caro volunteered to take on the job, expressing her desire to contribute despite her limited combat abilities. Athal was impressed by her initiative, but was even more surprised when she brought him edible meat from the monster. This made him reflect on how monsters could also be a source of food in this world. Afterward, the villagers held a feast, using the monster's meat to prepare various dishes. While gathering herbs for their next quest, Caro wondered if they should leave without saying goodbye to the villagers. Athal explained that it was still too early to disturb them, and she agreed. Caro was surprised to see Athal gathering so many herbs with ease. He credited it to her skill and encouraged Caro to keep going, reigniting her enthusiasm. He also reminded her of his promise to share the quest reward, praising her for her excellent contributions. Caro was astonished by Athal's offer. He encouraged her to look forward to the reward, which moved her deeply and filled her with anticipation. He encouraged her not to hesitate to voice her wishes. With a sincere look in her eyes, Caro admitted that she had something she wanted to say, prompting Athal to urge her to share. Caro expressed her strong desire to support Athal as an adventurer, which moved him. She recounted a childhood memory of being helped by an adventurer, which had sparked her dream of becoming one herself. Though her status as a slave prevented her from officially registering, nevertheless she still yearned to contribute, and that it brought her immense joy. Athal wholeheartedly agreed, expressing that he would love for her to accompany him on his journey. Caro's eyes sparkled with excitement. When Athal asked about her other wishes, Caro revealed that she had always dreamed of returning to her homeland just once. She dreamt of the familiar landscapes and wanted to be able to remember her parents. She mentioned that she was born in the land of the beast folk and expressed her longing to visit Sunbay, the place tied to her memories. Deeply moved, Athal stepped closer to Caro. She was stunned as he knelt down, took her hand, and promised to take her back to her homeland. His eyes were filled with sincerity, and Caro, unable to hold back her joy, thanked him radiantly. Afterward, the two of them finished gathering the required herb bundles and returned to the guild hall for lunch. As they entered, the other adventurers stared at them in surprise. Athal asked Caro if it was unusual to carry so many herbs, and she agreed. She suggested they buy an expansion bag, which intrigued Athal. She described it as an expensive magic bag capable of holding a vast number of items. Athal made a mental note to buy one later. The two of them then went to report their completed quest. Boras greeted them enthusiastically. Athal thanked him for his earlier help and presented the collected herb bundles, offering to sell the surplus at market price. He then presented the proof of completion for the wolf subjugation quest, which the villagers had provided. Boras immediately instructed Smith to gather more staff to verify this urgent quest. Meanwhile, Boras seemed lost in thought. Athal offered to come back the next day if they needed more time, but Boras assured him that wouldn't be necessary. However, with a concerned look, he asked Athal to follow him, gesturing for them to come past the reception desk and leading them upstairs. After knocking on a door, he announced Athal and Caro's presence. The door opened, and they came face to face with the elf woman who had been watching them from the window earlier. She introduced herself as Franfilia, the guild master of this branch, and welcomed them warmly. Franfilia gave Boras a bag of gold as thanks, and then let him leave. She invited Athal and Caro to sit down in her office. Franfilia explained that it was her responsibility to keep them fully informed about upcoming events. In response, Athal and Caro introduced themselves. She apologized for summoning them to her office and expressed her wish to discuss an important matter. Franfilia suddenly presented the magic stone from the Death Wolf, surprising Athal and Caro. They immediately recognized the sensitive issue of the villagers having hidden information about this monster. Franfilia smiled gently, saying that mistakes were unavoidable. But her gaze was sharp and knowing. Franfilia began to question the origin of the magic stone, deliberately probing for the truth. Athal tried to hold back some information, but Franfilia, with a confident demeanor, quickly saw through his dishonesty. Her sharp gaze scrutinized Athal, as if she suspected he possessed a special ability. While Caro waited nervously, Athal carefully considered his next move, realizing that Franfilia was not someone who could be easily deceived. He understood that misunderstandings could lead to a loss of trust and wanted to avoid that. Athal spoke up politely, meeting Franfilia's sharp gaze. She asserted that to take down a death wolf, Athal must know more than he was letting on. She tried to dig deeper into his story, making both Athal and Caro even more tense. Finally, Athal realized that continuing to hide the truth was pointless. He decided to tell the truth, but made an offer. He would reveal everything under 3 conditions. Franfilia listened intently, not taking official notes but showing great interest. His first condition was that no punishment be imposed on the villagers. Second, this conversation had to remain confidential. Finally, he pointed to the Death Wolf's magic stone, proposing that she buy it. Franfilia nodded, understanding his intentions perfectly. Athal then explained the misunderstanding in the villagers' request, causing the room to fall silent for a moment. Athal cautiously presented his rifle, while Franfilia observed every detail intently. However, he didn't reveal much about the weapon's special features, understanding the cautious and calculating nature of adventurers. Franfilia, noticing his reservation, didn't press further and turned to question Caro instead. The guildmaster asked if Caro was a healer. Athal quickly explained that she was more geared towards combat support. He then recounted in detail how they confronted the Death Wolf and dealt with it. Caro maintained a calm demeanor, while Franfilia pondered, her gaze resting on Athal. Their eyes met, and Franfilia seemed deeply impressed by his abilities. She wished them luck on their journey with the Adventurers Guild, and then surprisingly apologized for having interrupted them. This surprised Athal, especially when Franfilia said she had gathered all the information she needed. She then made a special offer. Caro would be officially registered in the Adventurers Guild, which made Caro incredibly excited. Athal was surprised by Franfilia's influence within the guild. She smiled, explaining that such cases weren't rare for guildmasters. She also reminded Athal to continue supporting Caro in her future activities. With that, Athal and Caro left Franfilia's office. Before leaving, Athal asked about the purchase of the magic stone. Franfilia smiled, assuring him that everything had been arranged. Caro politely said her goodbyes, and Franfilia stood by the window, watching them leave, lost in thought about the mysterious and intriguing Athal. Caro proceeded with the registration process just as Athal had done earlier, the excitement clear on her face. Athal congratulated her, and Caro felt like she was living in a dream. Buras encouraged her as well, while also apologizing to them both for the earlier interruption. Athal and Caro reassured him that they didn't mind. Suddenly, a group of adventurers ran into the guild, supporting an injured comrade. A heavily injured adventurer burst in, frantically warning of an urgent danger. A horde of monsters was advancing on the town. Athal and Caro were stunned by the news. Inside the guild, the atmosphere grew tense. The dying adventurer called for everyone's attention to the grave situation. Athal and Caro focused on the chaos unfolding in the guild, while Buras hurriedly pushed through the crowd, seeking answers from Adam, the injured adventurer. Adam, full of anxiety, repeated his warning about the monster horde approaching the town, making Buras even more tense. Buras told him to calm down and went to get him some water. Amidst the growing chaos of the crowd, Buras asked if anyone was familiar with the northern forest, where the monsters were gathering. The crowd murmured. While some adventurers seemed to dismiss the danger, Adam, gasping for breath, insisted that the threat was much greater than anyone thought. He was in shock. He revealed that he had sensed their presence during a quest thanks to his aura detection ability and had immediately returned to the guild to warn them. Caro quickly brought him some water to ease his exhaustion. Athal asked Buras about the severity of the situation, and Buras confirmed that it was a serious threat. He explained that it was like a monster stampede that had happened in the town before. Athal couldn't help but feel worried by this information. Buras suggested checking the records from the previous event to prepare a response. Just then, Franfilia appeared from the top of the stairs, her expression grave. Her presence stirred the crowd, as it was rare to see the guildmaster appear in such a situation. Franfilia, calm but firm, declared that everyone needed to focus on protecting the town and eliminating the monster horde. She announced a quest for all ranks called Operation Monster Extermination, with an initial reward of 5 silver coins, and more for those who performed exceptionally. This stunned the crowd. Franfilia stressed that adventurers would not be allowed to accept other quests until this one was completed, hoping to encourage solidarity. Athal and Caro gladly accepted the quest. Athal asked Buras how they would track the number of monsters they killed for the extra reward. Buras explained that the guild tags would be integrated with a tracking system, and they just needed to process the quest at the reception counter as usual. Athal understood how it worked and began to think. In his mind, Athal wondered if Doreen and Ashna already knew about the stampede. Given the reward he had once received from them, he felt a responsibility to participate in defending the town. He informed Caro that they would be taking on the quest, and she enthusiastically agreed. Buras was relieved by their decision and suggested they go to the reception counter to start processing the quest. However, they were suddenly blocked by a formidable-looking group of adventurers. One of them warned Athal and Caro that, as newcomers, they could still back out. Athal just gave a faint smile, reminding everyone that this mission is open to all ranks, just as Franfilia declared. The group of adventurers protested fiercely, arguing that newbies like Athal and Caro would slow them down and cut into their rewards. They vowed they wouldn't let that happen. Before things could get ugly, Franfilia appeared, quelling the chaos. Franfilia silenced the crowd, emphasizing the urgency of the situation and forbidding any infighting among the adventurers. The aggressive adventurer looked frustrated, but Franfilia stressed that during the stampede, all resources were needed, and every rank had a crucial role to play. Another adventurer argued that the rookies were only there for the reward and to play it safe. Athal shot back instantly, reminding him that the same could be said for critics like them. This caused the D-rank adventurers to take offense. Franfilia proposed settling the dispute by competing during the stampede with a new reward system. She declared that the adventurer with the best combat performance would receive the entire reward, plus a bonus. This rule made those who were only in it for the base reward hesitant. However, the aggressive adventurer objected. Franfilia then added a penalty. The losing party would have to pay the winner 12 gold coins, stunning the entire room. Athal confidently accepted. Demanding that the scoring system be fair, the leader of the aggressive adventurer group felt backed into a corner. Some in his group considered replacing him. But facing the pressure, he reluctantly agreed, declaring they wouldn't lose to a rookie like Athal. The crowd quickly started placing bets, with the majority favoring the D-rank adventurer group. Meanwhile, the guild staff were quietly assessing Athal's chances. Franfilia felt a little regretful for dragging Athal into this, but believed it would boost everyone's morale. She also asked them to overlook the betting, seeing it as extra motivation for the adventurers. Caro was surprised by Athal's confidence while he just smiled. Franfilia ordered Buraz to prepare a contract. Once both sides had signed, she presented the contract to the crowd, declaring that everyone in the room would be a witness to the agreement. She concluded by urging everyone to await the outcome. Then, she gave an update on the monster horde approaching the town and began directing the forces. She ordered the frontline fighters to take the lead, while ranged attackers were positioned in the rear. She also gave adventurers the freedom to fight in groups or alone, emphasizing that the town's safety depended on everyone's efforts. Franfilia's words of encouragement made the crowd roar with excitement. Athal, Caro, and Franfilia moved to the outer wall to observe the area ahead. Athal noticed the adventurers moving quickly to their designated positions, readying themselves for battle. Meanwhile, Franfilia asked Athal if such a distant position was okay for him. He confirmed that it was an advantage for his gun. Athal asked to prepare in private. Franfilia wanted to watch but respected his wishes. She reminded him that she was ready to help if needed, then left, leaving Athal and Caro alone. Athal then shared his plan with Caro, pointing out his attack position from above, where she could easily see him from the ground. Caro understood perfectly and confirmed she would fight on the front lines, trying to hold back the monster horde as it approached. Athal praised Caro for finding a good combat rhythm between them and handed her some spare knives. She happily accepted them, listening as he reminded her of something important. Athal warned her not to rely too much on his magic bullets, as they needed time to cool down before they could be used again. He stressed that she must avoid any situation that could lead to serious injury. Caro listened with an attentive gaze. Athal stepped closer, gently touched her face, and promised to protect her at all costs. Their hands brushed against each other. His intimate gesture moved Caro. She promised to remember his words, her heart filled with determination. In the sky, crows scattered, a bad omen. The monsters began to emerge from the forest. Caro called out Athal's name. Announcing that everything was ready, they quickly moved to their fighting positions. At the guild hall, Franfilia realized the stampede had begun, as a flock of crows scattered. From the forest, monsters like giant boars, goblins, and even stone giants charged out. heading straight for the town. The adventurers rushed forward to confront them, but the sheer number and ferocity of the monsters quickly overwhelmed them. A stone giant stomped hard on the ground, causing a shockwave that knocked many adventurers off their feet. Facing the relentless horde of monsters, they began to struggle to keep up. Amidst the chaos, Caro leaped into battle, attacking a giant Peyton goblin with impressive speed. Her swift movements and strength stunned the surrounding adventurers, who realized with amazement that she was the Beast Girl, fighting alongside the new adventurer, Athol. She expertly wielded her daggers, cutting down the monsters. As goblins tried to attack her from behind, a gunshot rang out, taking them down instantly. It was Athol, providing cover for her from a distance with his rifle. A large explosion set by Athol wiped out a wave of monsters, relieving the pressure on the battlefield. Athol and Caro smiled, satisfied with their seamless coordination. Meanwhile, the aggressive group of adventurers realized how few monsters they had actually managed to defeat, while Caro seemed to be effortlessly taking down droves of them. They began to fear they would fail, and their leader grew increasingly frustrated. The enraged leader came up with a dark plan to sabotage Caro. He cursed her, muttering his intention to tie her to a tree and incapacitate her. His group members looked nervous, trying to convince him to stop, reminding him that they had a lot riding on this quest. But he coldly brought up the contract they had signed. He was afraid that if they lost to newcomers like Athol and Caro, his group would lose face and drop in the rankings. After provoking the newcomers right in front of the guild, he knew he couldn't remain an adventurer in this town if he failed. Under pressure from their leader's plan, the group became even more anxious. The leader pulled out a rope, detailing his plan to tie Caro to a tree, tauntingly wondering if she'd be safe tied up amidst a horde of starving monsters. Meanwhile, his tense henchmen hid in the bushes, waiting to ambush Caro. She, however, was still absorbed in the fight, her daggers a blur as she cut down monster after monster. From his vantage point, Athol noticed the suspicious group. He sighed, recognizing the harsh, competitive nature of the adventurer's world. Deciding to teach them a lesson, he watched the group's actions carefully, curious about what they were planning. When he sensed something was wrong, Athol made his move. Suddenly, large boulders crashed down in front of the ambushers, startling them. They weren't sure where the attack came from. The leader reassured his cronies that the boulders weren't aimed at them. At that very moment, however, his rope was suddenly severed by sharp, flying objects. The members panicked as they saw spinning objects fall to the ground, suspecting it was Athol's doing. The leader immediately ordered them to grab Caro, but before they could move, lizard monsters suddenly appeared right in front of them, causing the entire group to scream in terror. But before they could even react, the lizard monsters were taken down by a lightning-fast attack. From a distance, Caro watched and realized she had just heard a resounding sound. Looking at the monsters collapsed on the ground, she became keenly aware of her own growing strength and progress. This made her even more skilled at protecting the body that Athol had healed from afar. She could feel Athol's constant support from behind, which gave her the strength to fight with all her might. Looking down at the knives he had given her, Caro noticed they had been destroyed in the battle, but the magic weapon was still intact. This made her happy, as it meant she could keep fighting and still feel useful to Athol. Meanwhile, Athol continued to fire his gun from the rear, providing her with steady support. With the aggressive group of adventurers no longer bothering him, he could focus completely on the battle. While taking aim, Athol heard Franfilia commenting on his weapon. Franfilia approached elegantly, remarking that this was the first time she had seen such a weapon used on the battlefield. She added that Athol was truly extraordinary. When Athol turned to look at her, Franfilia continued, pointing out the absolute trust Caro had in him, which allowed her to fight without any hesitation. Franfilia informed him that the number of monsters Athol had defeated had already surpassed that of even A-rank adventurers, which caught his attention. This made Athol start to trust the accuracy of the guild card. Franfilia smiled at his initial skepticism, reassuring him that the guild's card system had been in operation for centuries and was constantly being improved to ensure its accuracy. In the middle of their pleasant conversation, both were suddenly drawn to an unusual phenomenon. From their vantage point, they looked down and saw the forest shaking violently. Ethel realized the tremors were originating from deep within the forest and immediately suggested they should return to the fight. Franfilia, sensing the urgency, urged him to act quickly. Hearing the resounding howls of the monsters, Athol felt a sense of unease. Franfilia also noticed that the number of monsters was increasing exponentially and charging towards the town. Fully aware of the danger if the horde reached them, Athol made a quick decision. He would support the frontline fighters with precise shots from his rifle, while Franfilia promised to provide support, and quickly left to carry out her own duties. As he fought, Athol couldn't help but wonder how the situation would unfold as the danger grew. His fiery magic bullet struck multiple monsters, dealing heavy damage. A giant boar was incinerated by a magic bullet, easing the pressure on the melee adventurers. However, the situation was becoming more and more dire. One panicked adventurer reported to their leader that they were running out of stamina. Another noticed the number of adventurers on the front line was dwindling. The leader, clad in heavy armor, refused to retreat, fearing it would cause the defensive line to collapse completely. Athal noticed something strange. Even though he had taken down countless monsters, their numbers didn't seem to be decreasing at all. This confused him, and he began to suspect something was wrong. Suddenly, the forest began to shake violently. An eerie portal suddenly opened, and from within, a massive, sharp-clawed hand emerged. Immediately after, a terrifying monster appeared, with horned eyes and razor-sharp teeth, letting out a menacing roar.